My brother didn't just ruin my life. He stole my identity and lived it for a decade. I always believed my twin brother, Michael, was dead. For 10 long years, I mourned him. I visited his grave. I spoke to his headstone. I carried the crushing guilt of his supposed death with me every single day. Our parents, hollowed out by grief, never truly recovered. But the truth that shattered my entire existence, was far more monstrous than any tragedy I could have imagined. Michael wasn't dead. He had orchestrated the ultimate betrayal, and for a decade, he had been living my life while I was trapped in a hell of his making. Our story began like many twins' tales. Inseparable. Michael and I were identical in every way a mirror could reflect, but where our faces were the same, our souls were opposites. I was a driven one, the planner, the one who found solace in structure and hard work. Michael was a free spirit, brilliant but reckless, charismatic but deeply envious. He resented the ease with which I navigated life, viewing my methodical nature not as a strength, but as a dullness he was condemned to share a face with. The cracks started early. In high school, if I aced a test, he'd sabotage my project. If I made the soccer team, he'd get himself expelled from a different team for fighting. Our parents, loving but bewildered, tried to foster individual interests. Mark is our little engineer, my dad would say, proudly displaying my elaborate Lego constructions. And Michael is our artist, my mom would add, pointing to his chaotic but vibrant paintings. But Michael only heard the comparison. He saw my structured creations as good, and his free-form art as merely interesting. The resentment festered, a slow-growing poison. The fissure that would become a chasm opened after college. I was engaged to Emily, the love of my life, a brilliant and kind-hearted architect I'd met in a university library. She was my anchor, my future. I had also landed a prestigious job at Neurosphere, a cutting-edge tech firm specializing in neural interfaces. It was my dream job. Michael was adrift, a series of failed get-rich-quick schemes, cryptocurrency, dropshipping. A doomed attempt at being a social media influencer had left with substantial debt and a bruised ego. He'd show up at our apartment unannounced, smelling of cheap beer and desperation, borrowing money he never repaid, all while making snide comment about my soulless corporate drone existence. The night before my wedding, we had a vicious argument in the groom's suite. He was supposed to be my best man. He arrived late, already drunk. Another perfect step in the perfect life of perfect Mark, he'd slurred, tearing the wrapping off his best man gift. It was an expensive watch, a peace offering from me to him. It's not like that, Mike. I pleaded. This is my life. It doesn't have to be a competition. Everything is a competition, he'd exploded, getting in my face. Don't you see? Every time you succeed, I fail. Your existence makes mine a joke. You're stealing my life, my potential, by just being you. I dismissed it as alcohol and pre-wedding jitters, his usual dramatics amplified by the occasion. I was catastrophically wrong. A week after the beautiful, perfect wedding, a day Michael had spent with a fixed, strained smile, he suggested a hiking trip. Just the two of us, he'd said, his voice uncharacteristically earnest. A final adventure as brothers before you become a boring married man. To mend fences. Emily thought it was a wonderful idea. I was hesitant, but a part of me, the brotherly part that remembered building forts together, hoped this was his olive branch. The trip to the Grand Tetons was tense but civil. We set up camp at the base of the Serpent's Back, a notoriously treacherous ridge. The air was thin and cold. On the morning of the ascent, he was unusually quiet. As we navigated the narrow path, a sheer drop on either side, he started talking again, his words tumbling out in a frantic, paranoid rush. You know, they've already offered you a partnership, haven't they? He said, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. What? Who? Mike, Focus on where you're stepping. Neurosphere. Don't play dumb. Dad told me. They see great potential in you. Meanwhile, I can't even get a loan to cover my rent. Mike, this isn't the time. It's always the time for you, isn't it? He stopped and turned to face me, his back to the abyss. His eyes were wild, the same look he'd had the night before the wedding, but sharper, more dangerous. You get the girl, the job, the future. What do I get? Your leftovers. Your pity. He pointed a trembling finger at the 1,000-foot drop behind him. You see that? That's what my future looks like. Nothing. A void. While you get everything. A struggle ensued. I remember reaching for him, try to pull him back from the edge, both physically and metaphorically. I remember his hand, not grabbing mine in salvation, but shoving against my chest. There was a terrifying clarity in his eyes in that final moment, not rage, but cold, calculated resolution. I lost my footing. I remember the sheer terror of the fall, the world turning into a blur of rock and sky, the sound of my own scream echoing, and then nothing. I woke up weeks later in a remote Wyoming hospital, my body broken, my memory a scrambled mess. I had a severe concussion, multiple broken ribs, a shattered leg. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. A pair of experienced climbers had found me, miraculously caught in a sturdy pine tree partway down the cliff face. They said my brother, Michael, had not been so lucky. He had fallen to his death. They identified him by the wallet and personal effects found on the body at the base of the cliff. My wallet, my effects, in my disoriented, traumatized state, it made a twisted kind of sense. He must have grabbed my jacket as I fell, pulling my wallet out with him. I was too broken, too mentally fractured to question the narrative. The man in the morgue, battered beyond recognition, was buried as Michael. I was now the sole surviving twin, a walking ghost haunted by the brother I believed I had, in some way, caused to die. My recovery was long and painfully slow. The head injury left me with significant memory gaps, particularly around the accident itself. The world was foggy, loud, and overwhelming. Emily was my rock, her face a beacon of love and stability in the haze. But our relationship strained under the unbearable weight. The man who came back from that mountain was not the man she married. I was plagued by nightmares, anxiety attacks in crowded rooms, a deep-seated apathy. The promising career at Neurosphere was over. I couldn't concentrate for more than 10 minutes. The life insurance policy our parents had taken out on both of us paid out a substantial sum to me. It was blood money that felt like a curse, a constant reminder of the life that was extinguished to fund my broken one. Years passed. I drifted through life, a permanent resident in the long, dark shadow of my brother's death. My parents, though supportive, couldn't hide their disappointment. The successful son they knew was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out, irritable stranger. Emily and I eventually divorced. It was an amicable, soul-crushingly sad ending. She deserved a future, a partner, a life of joy, and I was incapable of providing any of it. I moved to a different city, started over as a night watchman, a job that required little interaction and even less thought, and tried to forget the person I used to be. Then, a decade later, everything changed. A former colleague from Neurosphere, a cheerful guy named Ben from the coding department whom I hadn't spoken to in years, tracked me down on LinkedIn. His message was simple, yet it sent a jolt of electricity through my entire being. Hey, Michael, long time no see. Crazy running into your doppelganger. I saw this guy at the Neurotech Summit last week and swore it was you, but he was introduced as your brother, Mark. Talk about identical twins. The resemblance is uncanny. Hope you're well. My blood ran cold. Michael. He'd called me Michael. And he'd seen me, or someone who looked exactly like me, being introduced as Mark. The world tilted on its axis. It was impossible. A sick joke. A case of mistaken identity. But a seed of terrifying, insane doubt had been planted. I spent a sleepless night falling down a digital rabbit hole. With trembling hands, I found the website for Neurosphere. And there he was, Mark, a senior vice president of innovation, a respected leader in the field. His profile picture was a slightly older, more refined, confidently smiling version of my own face. My brother's face. Our face. The life I had built, the career I had started, the identity I had lost. He had stolen it all. The accident wasn't an accident. It was a meticulously planned, brutal coup. He had pushed me, switched our identities, and left me for dead, taking my name, my wife, and my future for himself. The grief that had defined my existence for 10 years evaporated, replaced by a white-hot, all-consuming rage that threatened to burn me alive from the inside out. I became a man possessed. This was no longer about closure. It was about justice. I quit my job and used the last of my savings to hire a grizzled, ex-military private investigator named Frank. I told him everything. Frank, a man of few words, listened intently, his eyes narrowing. "Sounds like a hell of a story," he grunted. "Let's see if we can prove it." The investigation was a grueling, months-long process of exhuming a past I had tried to bury. Frank was a bulldog. He tracked down the 2 hikers who had found me. One of them, now retired and living in Arizona, recalled an odd detail over a crackling phone line. The fellow we found, he was mumbling before he passed out. Not "help me" or "my brother." He kept saying the watch. He took the watch. We figured he was delirious, talking about his own watch being broken in the fall. The watch, my peace offering. Michael had taken it from me, a final trophy. Frank also dug into the official inquest. The coroner's report, based on the identification from my effects, had been rushed. Dental records? Our dentist had retired years ago, and his records were allegedly destroyed in a flood. It was all too convenient. Michael had exploited every loophole, every piece of luck, with chilling precision. The most painful part was the surveillance. Frank obtained photos and videos of Mark's life. There he was, leaving our old house with Emily, holding her hand. They looked comfortable, happy. There was a child, a little girl about 8, with Emily's eyes and our shared smile. My niece, a child who believed the imposter was her father. The photos of him at industry events, accepting awards for work I had pioneered, were like salt rubbed into a wound that had never healed. Frank provided me with a schedule. The climax of Mark's deception was approaching, the annual Neurosphere Gala, where he was to receive the Pioneers Award, the company's highest honor, for his groundbreaking work on the ether neural interface, a project I conceived in my graduate thesis. It was the perfect stage for my return from the dead. The night of the gala, I put on the best suit I could afford, a cheap, ill-fitting imitation of the tailored ones I knew he'd be wearing. I felt like a ghost walking into a celebration of its own murder. The ballroom was a sea of opulence, filled with the city's elite, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the cold fury simmering inside me. And there he was, at the head table, holding Emily's hand. He looked confident, prosperous, every inch the man I was supposed to become. He had aged well. The decade had been kind to him, while it had carved lines of pain and hardship into my face. Seeing Emily was a physical blow. She was still beautiful, radiant. She looked happy. She looked content. The life she had with him seemed peaceful, whole. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Was I about to destroy her world, and the world of an innocent child, all over again? Was my vengeance worth their devastation? But then he stood up to accept his award. The room fell silent. He smiled, a smile I knew so well, but now it looked like a grotesque mask. He began to speak about his journey, his late nights, his vision for the Ether Project. He was telling my stories. He was using my words I had spoken to him in confidence a lifetime ago. The rage returned, cold and focused, burning away any last shred of doubt. As he reached the climax of his speech, thanking Emily for her unwavering support, I walked calmly down the central aisle toward the stage. A murmur went through the crowd. We were identical, but 10 years of hard living had etched lines on my face that his comfortable life had spared him. The confusion on his face was genuine for a split second before it morphed into abject, pants-wetting terror. He recognized me. He knew the ghost had finally come to collect its due. The color drained from his face. The glass award in his hand trembled. I took the spare microphone from the stunned CEO. The room was silent. Hundreds of eyes glued to the 2 mirror images on stage. "My name," I said, my voice, hoarse from disuse, echoing to the hall with a chilling clarity, "is Mark. And this man, this award-winning fraud standing before you, is my twin brother, Michael." I paused, letting the gasp subside. 10 years ago, on a ridge in the Grand Tetons, he didn't fall. He pushed me. He left me for dead, stole my identity, and for the last decade, he has been living my life, lying to my wife, and lying to all of you. Everything you know about him is a lie. The Ether Project was my thesis. This life is my life. The room erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed like lightning. Journalists scrambled for their phones. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her face a mask of horror, confusion, and dawning comprehension as she looked between the two of us, seeing the subtle differences she must have suppressed for years. Michael stood frozen, a statue of guilt, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him in real time. He didn't even try to deny it. The truth was written in the sheer terror on his face. What followed was a media circus that dominated headlines for weeks. The twin deception, the ghost who came back. The legal battle was long and painful. Proving my identity was a complex puzzle, but the evidence Frank and I had gathered was overwhelming. The testimony of the hiker about the watch. Financial records showing Michael's debts vanished after the accident. A handwriting expert who analyzed samples from before and after the event, confirming a significant change consistent with forgery. Most damningly, a DNA test comparing my sample to our parents conclusively proved I was their son. Michael was arrested for attempted murder, aggravated identity theft, fraud, and a host of other charges. The aftermath was almost as brutal as the discovery. Emily was utterly devastated. The man she had loved, slept beside, and built a family with for a decade was a monster. The father of her child was a calculated, cold-blooded manipulator. She came to see me once, in a quiet coffee shop. She was a shell of the woman I'd seen at the gala. Tears streamed down her face as she apologized over and over for not seeing it, for not realizing the man who came back from that hiking trip was different, colder, more detached. "He was so different," she whispered, clutching a tissue. "I thought it was the trauma. I thought I needed to be patient, to help him heal. He never wanted to talk about the accident. He said it was too painful. He used your memories, Mark. He'd talk about our first date, our wedding. But the details were always just a little bit off. I thought he was just misremembering because of the head injury. I couldn't blame her. He had perfected the imitation, using my memory loss and his intimate knowledge of me to become a convincing, if flawed, version of Mark. He had weaponized her love and compassion against her. Our parents were shattered. To learn that the son they had mourned for a decade was not only alive, but a calculated criminal, and that the son they had struggled to connect with was the victim of such an unimaginable betrayal, broke them in a way Michael's death never had. The guilt they carried for not suspecting a thing was a new, heavy burden. My mother kept saying, "How did I not see it? A mother should know her own son." My father retreated into a silent, angry shell. Michael was eventually convicted on all counts and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. I was legally reinstated as Mark Aston. Neurosphere, eager to avoid further scandal, offered me a hefty settlement and a consulting position, which I refused. I wanted no part of that world anymore. I reclaimed what was left of my assets, which Michael had managed surprisingly well, likely to maintain his cover. But you can't reclaim a decade. You can't reclaim a marriage. You can't erase the trauma. The money meant nothing compared to the loss. I tried to reconnect with Emily for the sake of the child, my niece, Sarah. But the foundation was built on sand. The trust was gone, replaced by a complex web of pain and betrayal. Every meeting was filled with a profound sadness. We decided it was best to go our separate ways, to allow her and Sarah to build a new life, far from the toxic shadow of the Aston twins. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was the right one for their healing. I used a large part of the settlement to establish a generous trust fund for Sarah, ensuring her future was secure, no matter what. The rest I invested wisely. I started a new company, but this time it was entirely my own vision, a non-profit organization that helped victims of identity theft and long-term missing persons. It was a slow, painful process of rebuilding not just a career, but a soul. My own experience gave me an empathy that became my driving force. I visit my parents regularly. The dynamic is awkward, filled with a sadness that may never lift. They look at me and see the son they lost, and they look away and remember the son they have to forget. The grave we visited for 10 years is empty, a monument to a lie that defined our family for a decade. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I think about Michael in his cell. Does he feel remorse? Or does he still cling to the belief that he was entitled to my life? I'll never know. I made the choice never to see him again. My lawyer conveyed a message from him once, a request for a meeting. I declined. Some doors, once open, reveal a darkness that can swallow you whole. It's better to leave them locked and bolted shut. My story isn't one of happy revenge. It's a story of survival. I am a man who was erased and had to painfully, slowly, write himself back into existence. The world knows the truth now, but the scars remain deep and permanent. I am Mark, but I am also the ghost of Michael, and the ghost of the man I was before the fall. I am all three, forever intertwined, learning to live in a present that was stolen from me for 10 long years. The path forward is mine to walk now, alone, but finally, authentically as myself.